Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop, and yes, it is that time again for the chisel test. 43 chisels, the most comprehensive and scientific chisel test ever done in history. This is going to be a lot of fun. Let's dive in. Normally I reserve this channel for just easy listening, easy talking. So this is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to try and keep it as short as possible. I'm not going to go into all of the crazy spreadsheets on this channel. If you want to see that, hop over to the other channel. On that one, that's going to be a much longer video where I'm going to do a really deep dive and go through this whole thing, looking at all the numbers and how it all correlates. So without further ado, and to save your time, the best overall chisel on all of them, according to my ranking and the way I fit to them, is the Nerix Richter. Just barely, but it is. And for the price, for 30 bucks a piece, that you really can't beat. Next closest would be PMV11 or an old file if you can get that, but I'll be talking about that a little later because I don't really trust that. And actually one of the new ones I tried is the Kimmins chisel. Now these are really nice chisels. They're one of the most expensive on here, but the money backs them up. So I was actually really surprised and happy with these. They are all individually small batch made, and I like these. On the other end of the spectrum is, by no one's surprise, it's the plastic handled Harbor Freight chisel. This is slightly better than a screwdriver. Close to it is the new Bucks Brothers. This was just, it was pretty close to trash. I was not happy with it at all. So without further ado, all of the chisels that I have in the test, we have the Aldi chisel, Ashley Isles, Baco Ergo, which is actually, a lot of people consider this the best chisel ever made, and they're actually kind of collectible because of that, but it is where Baco bought out EA Berg and they started to do a few things with it. If I were to include the Baco Ergo, I would have 9 different Baco or EA Berg chisels, but for the average test with the EA Berg, I just went with the ones that were actually branded EA Berg, not the ones that were branded Baco. We also have a Blue Spruce, we have the Blue Steel, we have the Bucks Brothers, we have a Craftsman Black, we have a Gerbeck, which is a cheap one from Amazon, we have a Harbor Freight plastic, a Harbor Freight wooden, Holes First black handle, which has a flat bottom, Holes First red handle, which is a little more cost-effective one, IBC, Irwin Marples clear, Irwin Marples blue, we have the Kimmins chisel, as well as a new prototype he lent me to test out the steel, Cobalt chisel, a Kelby, which is another Amazon type, Lee Nielsen, Nerix Richter, Nerix Standard, and the steel they use in the Nerix Standard is also the exact same steel in the Nerix Premium, it's just a different handle. It's a Swedish chisel. I have a file that was now 22 years old, as well as a brand new file, or at least it was 2 years ago. Robert Sorby, the Stanley Everlasting chisel, Stanley Sweetheart, a 2 cherries, a Veritas PMV11, white steel, Wood River with the green handle, and Wood River with the socket handle. Whew, lots of chisels. After the first round of series, one of the things that I heard over and over again is you've got to try EA Berg chisels. They are the best chisel ever made, good quality, old school steel. And I'm a little hesitant to test old chisels. I do have a few of them in here because I wanted to actually have a little bit of a comparison. But one of the problems with old chisels before computer-aided tempering and hardening is that there was a large variety from batch to batch. So if I tested one chisel, it's really not fair to the older chisels because I might be testing one that is actually a bad sample for that. And so I would love to get 30, 40 of one and actually do a whole bunch on that. But in this case, I was able to get a bunch of EA Berg. There were a couple people who supplied these, and I got to test them from different time periods. And it was very interesting to see how they actually stood up from one time period to another. There was actually a pretty decent variability in the EA Berg over them. One of them ranked in the top 10, which I was really surprised by and very happy. It did very well. But some of them were less quality. I kind of expected to see that the newer the chisel, the less quality it got, but I really didn't see that. There was a very wide smattering. Some of them were really good, and some of them were just not quite as good as you would want or expect from something that is held in such high esteem. So it's kind of one of those things where, yeah, you might get a really good chisel, or you might not, and you don't really know. And so I actually compiled all of the EA Berg on a separate sheet on the main spreadsheet, so you can go through and just look at those, as well as compiled an average of them, so you can see where the average would fit. And the average fit right down the middle of the list at slot number 21. So they were pretty much average chisels right in the middle of the batch. Another interesting one is the white steel. Now last time I tested the blue steel. Now these are Japanese with a very hard on one side and a soft on the other. And they're really kind of cool chisels. They're generally considered to be one of the more cost-effective Japanese chisels, so I don't really have a chance to try a really high-end good Japanese chisel, maybe someday. But a lot of people said, ooh, the white chisels, that's what you got to get. They're far better than the blue steel. The white steel ended up at number 10, and the blue steel ended up at number 13, which is actually just basically about the same. So one or the other, yeah, there were slight characteristic differences in hardnesses of the steel, and so if something like that matters to you, you can check it out. One of the things I have to point out about the whole ranking is it is my ranking. So it has my own personality put into it. And one of the interesting things is I have all of the raw data on the sheet. And so if you want to find out what works better for you, there's a way you can sort through that. Because choosing a chisel is a really personal task. What might be the absolute best chisel for me might be down at, 10, 15 to you. So it's kind of interesting to find which one works importantly to you. I have rankings on durability, keenness, sharpenability, hardness, feel, and price. And each one of them down at the bottom, there is a different weight. So if something is really important to you, if you really, really care about the hardness of a chisel, you can put a weight of 10. And if you don't really care about the price, money isn't a matter, you put that as a 1 or a 0. And so you can actually go through and specify the list to see which ones would come out on top to you. I'll leave a link to the data sheet down below, but if you really want to dive into that, go look at the other channel and I'll actually explain it because there's a lot of intricacies to it that will make far more sense once you understand what all's going on in there. Some of the correlations I found out were a little bit surprising, actually. There is actually a bit of a correlation between price and quality. Yes, the cheapest one on the list is the worst one, but the Nerix Richter is actually mid of the pack in price and ended up being the top. Though close to it are the Siemens chisels, and these were the most expensive, but they're right at the top of the list. There is actually a pretty good correlation between price and quality. You do generally get what you pay for. Another correlation that popped up is hardness to sharpenability. The harder a chisel is, the harder it is to sharpen. And that's actually kind of obvious. You would expect that. There were a few that were variant on there. The PMV11 was a bit of a change in that. And from steel to steel, there were some fluctuations. But in general, the harder the chisel, the more time you're going to spend sharpening it. The softer the chisel, the easier it is to sharpen. Kind of obvious, but it's nice to have it in numbers. I really expected there to be a reverse correlation between hardness and durability. In other words, the harder the chisel, the more durable it was. And really, there wasn't a very strong... And in all honesty, there was basically... And in the end, there's basically no correlation between hardness and durability. Because there comes a point at where the hardness doesn't matter anymore. If you go harder than that, you're going to be chipping it. If you go softer than that, you're going to be rolling it over. In both cases, you're going to end up with a dull chisel that's going to require more work. I generally prefer to roll a chisel over than to sharpen it, but in most cases, it just came to where it fell on that line, and there wasn't really a correlation between hardness and durability. One of the other fun characteristics is keenness. In other words, how sharp can you get it? Now, most of the time, keenness really doesn't matter that much because after a few whacks with a mallet, you're going to be back down to a standard edge. It really doesn't take that much to knock off the absolute sharpest keenness. But if you're going to be doing a lot of in-grain paring, keenness can be very important. A harder chisel did not necessarily mean a keener chisel, and there were several that bounced in and out of that. So it was kind of an interesting data point to pull out. The last variability is feel, and in all honesty, that's a really, really personal thing. I have all the characteristics of length and weight and sharpness and edge size and balance, so if you want to go through, you can try and find one that fits your feel characteristic. For me, none of these chisels would rank a 10 because none of them are exactly perfect. The Nerix and the Siemens are really, really close to perfect. I love both of them. I think if I had to pick one or the other, I'd say the Siemens is slightly better. I would love it if they had ever so slightly flat edges on them, but that's just a personal choice. Your choices and what actually is feel may be completely different. For me, a socket's a big turnoff. I don't like sockets, so their feel is down a good bit more. So that's kind of one of those things where it's a very subjective thing, but yeah, you can go through and change the numbers to fit your characteristics and what you like in the spreadsheet. 42 chisels, and There are still lots more I could be testing. There are lots of other ones out there I didn't quite get to, and I know I'm going to be getting comments of, why didn't you test this one? Because I didn't. And I didn't go through a lot of the old ones because the amount of work it would require to get a large enough sample size to really know them isn't doable. And even with the EA Berg that I did in this one, I'm kind of reticent to cast judgment on it because I only did a sample size of 7. And you know, that's pretty good, but it's not amazing. So if I ever want to test an old chisel that was actually hardened and tempered by eye and a thermometer, that's a little, I don't like casting judgment on that kind of information. So maybe if I do an update to this and I have more chisels sometime in the future, we can add other things like that, and let me know what you want. I'll try and think about them. So after about 400 hours of actual testing, yeah, this has been a lot of fun, and there are lots of interesting things on this. I would love to hear what thoughts you have, and definitely go check out the other video where you can actually dig into the spreadsheet. Don't take my word for it. Look at the raw numbers and come to your own conclusions, because picking a chisel is a very personal choice. What's absolute best for me may not be absolute best for you. I also need to say a huge thank you to everyone who has provided me chisels to do testing. There were a bunch in the previous test, but in this one I really had a lot from you, the viewers. So thank you. Daniel Jansen, Adam Fott, Aaron Fenn, Randy Ridley, Ava Sato, James Waplan, I'm sorry, I'm butchering names, Matthew Wright, Peter Bonsigneri, and Kimmons Tools. So thank you all for sending these in to be tested. You'll be getting them back here soon. And if you do ever meet any of them on social media or in person, tell them thank you, because they are actually being able to provide these so I can get the data out. I would love to hear your thoughts, ideas. Throw them down below. It does help out the channel. When you hit like, comment, share, and subscribe, that means a lot. So thank you for that. Also, on top of this, this test is actually a very, very expensive thing with the testing rig and everything that goes into it. I've put quite a bit of money into this test. So if you'd like to help out with that, there's always Patreon. Everyone's scrolling over to the side. They are the patrons on Patreon, as well as members on the channel. Without patrons and members and people who support this channel, we wouldn't be able to do tests like this. So if you'd like to find out more about that and help out, there's links to Patreon down below in the description, or click the little join button and become a member here on YouTube. We do have special perks for both patrons and members, as well as all of the raw data from this was available to patrons and members as it came out. So there were several people who were keeping track of it and watching what I was doing and actually providing some feedback on that. So thank you to that. I do think that's about it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. Chisels have an interesting way of chiseling away at your pocketbook. Maybe that's where the term comes from. Ah, stink. I've been chiseled out of even more money.